pod. Oh no, my mic is a little too far away. Let's move that a little closer. Yeah, it wasn't picking up well.
Let me lay down and boot up a game like I did for the Bebop episode.
Oh my god, what game are you gonna boot up?
I was playing Crosscode yesterday.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Our Anime Podcast. I'm Fate Steel Taylor, but you can call me Tay. And today we're talking about SSSS.Gridman and SSSS.Dynazenon. I don't know if there's supposed to be a dot. I just say it. Is it like Hunter x Hunter where you're not supposed to say it?
Yeah, I don't think you say the punctuation.
All right. So we're talking about SSSS.Gridman and SSSS.Dynazenon. Thank you, Shaw. And today we're joined by some amazing people, including SSSS Shaw. How you doing, fam?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Or should it be SSSS Shaw or just Shaw?
I mean, the way I'm pronouncing things, it'll probably be the second, but like the first one sounds more official, so I appreciate it.
SSSS.Dynazenon?
Yeah,
something like that.
Shout out to Invisalign, not sponsoring this episode, but sponsoring my speech impediment and my lisp. Thank you. Thank you so much.
This episode is brought to you by Mozilla Fennekin. How you doing, Moz?
It's Snowzilla right now. It's Snowzilla season.
Yeah. It is December. 'Tis the season.
Yeah, it's also like 70 degrees outside.
You know, it's like the globe is warmer every year. I don't know what's going on. It's throwing me off.
It's not a globe, it's a donut.
I see. The donut is warming up every year.
Yes.
Gotcha. Well, I don't know how I was gonna transition from that. I was gonna call you a donut expert, AJ, but I'm not sure if you are.
I'm really not. But
Well,
I mean, you can.
I'm glad I clarified.
You can pretend I am if you want.
Okay, let's go. And the donut expert extraordinaire, AJ himself. How you doing, fam?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. And I know you get this question a lot. What is your favorite kind of donut?
Boston cream.
Yeah.
Boston cream. Let's go. Let's go. Okay. I would also have to agree. Shaw, what's your favorite kind of donut?
I think glazed or like powdered jelly donut.
That's too passe. Moz.
Okay.
Bavarian custard.
What?
Okay.
What even is that? Maybe Moz is the donut expert.
I told you, Shaw, you are so passe and
I'm sorry.
when it comes to donuts.
Maybe Moz is the donut expert. I didn't know. Damn.
Yeah. Everyone here is the donut expert except for you. You didn't get the memo.
Agree. I would agree with that sentiment.
All right, before we start doing donuts, let's actually start going back to the topic at hand. So today we are talking about Trigger's, I want to say latest franchise, because it is their latest thing where they've done multiple entries out of it. Since the only other one I want to say is Inferno Cop and Little Witch Academia. So
and I think they did that BNA.
Company.
That BNA anime too.
BNA only had one season so far.
Oh yeah, so we're counting.
I don't know if the second season has been announced.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. Okay.
But
yeah, I wasn't sure.
But yeah, so we've had Little Witch Academia, and now we have Gridman and Dynazenon. And just a heads up, this is gonna have spoilers for both of them.
SSSS spoilers.
I'm
sorry, that was terrible. I'm done. I'm done.
No, that was good.
I'm done with the podcast.
What is it?
Thank you.
Special something to save a spoiler.
Okay, because I forgot that they had meanings for the SSSs. I forgot. So that's a good reminder.
Yeah, special signature to stop a spoiler. That's what that intro was.
Perfect.
So we had SSSS Gridman, which came about in, what was it?
2018.
2018. And that was a crazy time because I remember when it was coming out, it didn't have that much fanfare around it, I feel like, even though it was a Trigger property. I feel like early impressions were that it was a little slow and people didn't really know much about Gridman in the first place. I mean, the story is that the director, Akira Amemiya, actually wanted to get the rights to Ultraman, but Subaraya, who has the rights to Ultraman, were like, we're not going to give you Ultraman. He was like, what about Gridman? And they were like, yeah, fucking like, nobody cares about Gridman. You can do an anime about Gridman. And he was like, fucking got him. That's what I wanted all along. because back a few years ago in the Japan Animator Expo, he had actually done a short film based off the series for Gridman. I think it's like Electric Boys Create Hero or something, which is like a sequel to the original Gridman series. And then he was like, perfect, now I get to do a full-fledged anime series for Gridman. So, AJ, how did you first get into Gridman? Was it while it was airing? Did you hear about it on Twitter or for friends? What were your first impressions?
Well, I'm pretty sure I didn't actually start watching it right away. I just heard some people whose tastes I align with say that it was really good, and so I checked it out because of that. And I guess my first impressions were generally pretty solid. I think more than anything, I admired the directing and tone, while there being enough of a hook to sort of keep me stringing along. But yeah, I guess those were my first impressions, and they sort of carried through all the way towards the end. And then by the end, I was really impressed with the conclusion. And yeah, I'm not the biggest Gridman fan in the world, but I think I admire what it does conceptually and like as a piece of art, while not being, I guess, emotionally connected to it much. But I'm really glad that it exists, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I feel that. And I feel like a lot of people have that same mentality. Love it or hate it. The ending especially, which we can get to later, is one of those things where it's like really ambitious what it goes for. And it's one of those things where like it pays a lot of homage to a lot of tokusatsu productions and mecha anime that came before it.
Yeah.
But also doing its own thing and sending its own message, which was really cool. And what was your general feeling towards, I guess, Studio Trigger at the time? Like, what kind of connotation did that name have for you?
I generally respected them, but I've still to this day not seen Little Witch Academia or a couple of their other works. So I guess sort of a detached respect for it while not being a huge fan.
But have you seen like Kill la Kill then,
Yeah,
I'm assuming? Yeah. Premiere.
Yep.
But Premiere was afterwards. One of my favorite things about Gridman, which we can elaborate further, is how that and Premiere seem to be a direct response to their feelings towards Darling in the Franxx. Yes, but we do have Trigger Superfan in the house today, and Shocking 807, who, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were at the NA premiere for the Promare film at AX, where you received a hand-drawn shikishi from Studio Trigger themselves.
Yeah, how could I forget? Because
you know, in case you forget, I'm here to remind you.
I appreciate it. I think it's more impressive that you got to speak to Imaishi, because you low-key speak Japanese, and you said, I think you said fan, like, hi, like a fan of your work or something, and he like nodded back at you.
Yes.
Yeah, so
it was great. It was a highlight.
That was a great moment. Yeah, that was definitely like a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory moment, but I've been a big fan of Studio Trigger ever since I've seen Kill la Kill, but also since Studio Trigger made a special episode of Inferno Cop specifically for a New Jersey convention where they had everyone chanting New Jersey. So I think...
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this.
Based on a true story.
Whoa. It was the best.
Yeah, it's tough to describe. They kind of had like, I forget the name of the con. It was like New Jersey something, but
Anime Next.
Anime Next, that's it. Okay. So we were there and they made like a special episode of Inferno Cop where he like saves New Jersey. And like if you've seen Inferno Cop, it's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like negative animation. Like it's kind of like those videos where you see people like in Photoshop like literally moving the people. It's kind of like that. So they could like kind of whip it up like really quickly, and it's like this 5-minute thing of him like taking someone out and then chanting New Jersey for like 4 minutes straight. So it was like it was just a ridiculous
So what happens
thing.
Is Inferno Cop has to go to New Jersey, and while he's there, he realizes there is a zombie apocalypse going on.
Oh, that's inconvenient.
And the person the most important person in New Jersey is under attack, and Inferno Cop has to save him.
Yeah.
The most important person in New Jersey being a caricature of the president of Anime Next. And so he defeats the zombies by setting them all on fire. And he's like, oh, I couldn't. They're like, thank you, Inferno Cop. And Inferno Cop goes like, no, thank you, New Jersey. Come on, everyone. New Jersey. New Jersey. And he's like, stand up, everyone. And this entire crowd in New Jersey is standing up, fist pumping to New Jersey as Inferno Cop and the Trigger staff are there encouraging everyone.
Like handing out.
It was the highlight of my life.
Handing out like marshmallows and shit every time someone answers a question. So it's like the most Trigger thing you would expect. But I think the best way to summarize Studio Trigger is their personality is just like really bringing fun to anime, but they're putting in so much work to make it feel so fun. And what's interesting is like that over the top, like bombastic, in your face energy that we're so used to them is really not apparent in Gridman. So I think it's kind of interesting that like one of their more recent series is this very subdued kind of mellow series that still has a lot of, you know, not bombastic action. Like it's not over the top. It's definitely like, you know, end of the world type fights, but it really does focus on the mundane slice of life aspects. So I could understand a lot of people tuning in 2018, seeing Gridman and not even knowing it's a Trigger series.
Yeah, and this was especially right because this came out in 2018, the same year that Darling in the Franxx had come out. Darling in the Franxx had come out earlier that year in the winter.
And Tay had never forgiven them.
Trigger has never forgiven themselves for being associated with Darling in the Franxx. That's an episode for another day, but suffice to say, when they gave a panel at Anime New York City, and they did a film reel of everything they had, and Darling in the Franxx wasn't there. And someone asked the question because they did a Q&A being like, why didn't you guys have any Darling in the Franxx footage there? They're like, we worked on the initial stuff. And then once we saw where it was going, we wanted no part of it. And I don't think we're going to be doing a collab with another studio ever again because of it.
Wow.
Yeah, they were like, we're flattered that people think that they really liked it and that we had a lot to do with it. Especially because of the ending in Darling in the Franxx and how over the top it is. But believe us, we had no connection to it. Do not attribute anything in Darling in the Franxx to it, negative or positive. And I was like, wow, they really did not like Darling.
Like, that ain't me, fam.
Yeah, ain't me, fam. And how about you, Moz? How did you get into Gridman and what were your first impressions?
I think I was just watching Gridman because I was doing seasonal anime normally for the podcast. So I don't remember if I had any expectations going into it, but I do remember that I was really kind of floored by the first episode, honestly. I was really kind of blown away by just how strangely off-putting, but in a good way, all of the entire tone of the episode was, how kind of weird the characters acted and how unique the cinematography was. Like there's a bit in the first episode where they're like jump cuts for I forgot their freaking names. Oh god, I'm such a fucking idiot. Rika and Yuta. I knew Rika.
Yeah.
I forgot my favorite characters from Love Chunibyo, Rika and Yuta. But they have a conversation and they're like jump cuts in between sentences and it's so weird. But
it felt very While I was watching it, you make a good point because I felt like it, in a similar way the first time I watched Eva. Because the first time I watched Eva, the first episode, there are those like jump cuts, right? Like when Shinji's at the phone and then he like looks out to the road and he sees Rei, or like an image of Rei. He comes back to the road and she's not there, and it's like the pacing of it is slightly off kilter. Not enough for you to be like, oh, this is bad, but enough for you to be like, this is
it's uneasy,
different.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just it's just enough to make you think, okay, something's going on here. There's going to be a point to this.
when the special dog gets hit out of Akane's hand. And then there's like that or like 30-second shot of everyone just like looking around at them after the volleyball hit the special dog onto the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those things for me, because I grew up with tokusatsu. My dad was actually a huge Ultraman fan growing up. He grew up in Kyoto, not too far from what he says where they shot Ultraman. So he loved tokusatsu growing up, and he instilled a lot of that into me. And then I grew up with a lot of the Brave series in terms of like Sunrise mecha anime. And so a lot of Gridman early on, I was like, oh, these mechas are clearly meant to be toys. This is clearly supposed to be merchandise. Like the way everything fits together, the way the joints are, like this is very easily marketable toys. But I love it.
I have a question about that actually.
Yeah.
So for someone who grew up on that sort of thing, did those sorts of references and I guess little homages and whatever, did they enhance your appreciation or enjoyment of it a lot, or was it just like a cool little side thing for you?
Oh man, I think for me, it originally started off as like that's like a neat reference kind of thing. Like, oh, like, haha, like, I understood that reference, Jeff, you know? But later on, as the series went on and you start to see like where those inspirations, like, it's not just like, I know we mentioned it before, so I'm going to use that as an easy example. Darling in the Franxx used a lot of Eva imagery to the point where like there's the one scene where he's I forget what his name is, Hero, is in the cockpit and he's like being like move, and it's like synced exactly to Shinji's. But it doesn't have nearly the same impact that it does in Evangelion. And it felt like someone just like looking at a Renaissance painting and copying it, like stroke for stroke. But for here, it felt like initially they're like looking at it and they're inspired by it, but they're making their own piece. And that's the feeling I got with their references as I was watching it. It was like those are the things like, hey, like we're doing this. This is the kind of story beat we might be setting up, but we want you to know like we care about this genre. It was like almost like a reassurance that they like knew what they were doing.
Yeah, because I feel like a reference can kind of go either way. Because, like, I appreciate a good reference, you know, Gintama fan, that's like half the series is a reference to something. But even in Gintama, it's like not all references are golden. So I feel like sometimes you see a reference and you're like, oh, this is a really cool callback. I can see a comparison or connection between these two series. And then you get another reference and you're like, no. How dare you stand where he stood? You did not earn that. Like, you did not earn this reference. So I think it's really tough to kind of harken back to such an established property like Gridman and just Tokusatsu as like an entity because so many people know about it. So it is kind of like you really have to deliver and bring your own twist to it. Otherwise, it will kind of just feel like a cheap ripoff. So it's really tough to avoid that.
Yeah, to put it another way, like Evangelion is like the gold standard for like mecha anime inspired by tokusatsu. So like you try to like follow in those footsteps, you better not trip, you know? And I think one of those like references that I think it's like, oh, haha, I understood that reference is the explosion effect after like every big fight. I forget if it's from the Brave series or if it's from the Might Gain series, but it's like the exact same explosion effect that they used in like the 80s or 90s for like every single episode, and like it explodes in the exact same way in the way it takes up the screen with the fire and the smoke. It's one of those things where like, oh, these guys like clearly did their research, like, haha, that's funny, that's like a nice callback. But I think a reference that we all can kind of appreciate as people who have seen Evangelion is like when Yuta Hibiki like opens his eyes and he does the Shinji like looking up at this unfamiliar ceiling thing.
Yeah.
And it's we find out he has suffered memory loss and like he doesn't know what's going on. And in the same way, so for him that is an unfamiliar ceiling, but in a different way than it was for Shinji.
Yeah, that is a different aspect because I don't think Shinji ever has memory loss. He might at some point, I kind of forget, but
I think he just like blacks out in the first episode when Unit 01 goes like beast mode, and then he like wakes up in the hospital, and they're like, you remember what happened? And then like it flashes back to what happened.
Yeah. So it is interesting because Yuta has that weird kind of like blank slate aspect to him where like he doesn't really have a lot going on and he's just kind of going with the flow. But it does really work, where they see where it goes with his character later on. But it's definitely interesting. I remember we had a conversation about Gridman and Ava, and you were like, yeah, there's like so much like connection to Ava. And at the time, I'm like, I don't know. I don't really see it. I don't see it. And then it like grew on me, like the thought of like, oh yeah, the Ava connections really grew on me. And then when I recently rewatched Ava, I was like, okay, yeah, the way they have the kind of mundane, like the kind of like individual crises of their daily lives and like decision making with like the end of the world type fights. I'm like, there's so many Ava inspired series and so many Ava like ripoffs, for a lack of a nicer term. But this is the one series that I feel like really captures the spirit and essence of Ava and like does something else with it.
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that really drew me in the first early episodes was how it framed everything. Like, one thing Anno did particularly well with Evangelion was the use of power lines to frame characters. And like, either like feel like they're trapped by the sky or like separated. And he always had like power lines in the field of vision. And Gridman did the exact same thing with the power lines, but to show kind of like the distance between like the humans and the huge kaiju that were around the city, the fixer kaiju. And I think for not just myself, but for a lot of people, Gridman really turned from a show that was like had a lot of references and like cool mecha fights and like really cool kaiju designs into something that with an ambitious message with episode 9, which is the dream episode.
Yeah, that was a huge turning point. That's when you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's what like this has all been building towards. That was really special.
Yeah, and the dream episode is episode 9 by Kai Ikarashi, who sorry, not Kai Ikarashi, Yoshiyuki Kaneko, and it was his directorial debut.
No, I thought it was Kai Ikarashi.
I think Kai Ikarashi storyboarded it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was like the duo of them. But it was just absolutely insane how they came together. And Maz, what were your thoughts on episode 9, Dream?
It was amazing. It was an absolutely amazing episode. I regret not watching it like as it came out because I watched the show as it came out, but I watched this like the day after, and I like totally missed the Reddit discussion. And I'm like, I don't think enough people are actually appreciating this, like just how masterful this was. It's just how creative and unique this episode was, while again still feeling like it has a lot of references. It very much felt like one of the episodes of Evangelion with like Shinji in the sandbox. It kind of gave me that feeling with how sort of weird and alone Yuta was.
And especially Akane.
Oh yeah, and Akane, of course.
Yeah,
I think that was
how
Akane
isolated
episode.
she is.
I think that's what I meant to say.
With all the
I've seen this show. I know what I'm talking about.
How about you, AJ? What were your thoughts on Dream?
Well, I probably can't reference any huge specifics because it's been so long, but in terms of just general feelings I got, I think it was where I realized sort of, so I saw like what was going on with the characters and like in general what their motivations were, or where things seemed to be going, but I didn't really have a clear idea of what it was going to lead to, and then it sort of all sort of fit into place when I saw episode 9, and I felt like it was the moment where I sort of understood it, because a lot of the time throughout its run, when I started watching, I think 3 or 4 episodes in, and then was doing it weekly, I felt a little bit on the outside looking in because I did not grow up on any of these series, and so I didn't understand any of the references. So there wasn't as much for me to grasp onto. But episode 9 comes together, I think, it uses those aspects, and then it just as a piece of storytelling, and all the breadcrumbs sort of leading up to this point. So I think, it was basically the moment or the episode where I felt like, okay, yeah, I think I get it,
I think you really nail it, because I think until that point, it feels like Yuta is supposed to be the main character, because that's what the normal thing to do would be. But with episode 9, we really find out that the main character and the one that the show is revolving around is Akane.
Yeah.
And it's about Akane's loneliness and the trouble she's going through, and how she desperately wants to connect with people, right? It's so much so that she creates a kaiju that isn't going to destroy the city, isn't going to do anything, isn't going to kill anyone, but just try and trick these 3 kids into being her friends, into being close with her.
And sorry,
No, go.
Okay. So like you guys were talking about early on, it establishes this weird sense of uneasiness through the direction and the cuts and everything. And in terms of tone, I felt like it felt really lonely from the start, but it was a sort of a loneliness that I couldn't really place. I didn't really know what the source of that was. And I felt it, but I didn't really know, I couldn't really make sense of it. And then episode 9 is where I felt like, okay, that's where all of this is coming from. Maybe not all of it, but the vast majority of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because it starts off on that shot of the train crossing with the red light, and then every time it cuts to a different dream scene, it cuts back to that, and it cuts back to Akane in the rain, lonely on an edge, looking down at the city. And I recently rewatched it, and the thing that really stood out to me is there's basically no OST until the very end.
Oh, wow.
There's no music, no soundtrack for it at all.
That's most episodes.
Yeah, a lot of it is. And to me, when I watched it, I was like, oh, this... man, it's like that meme, man who has only seen Boss Baby watching his second film, getting a lot of Boss Baby vibes from this.
Yeah.
I feel like a broken record when I'm talking about Gridman, man who has only seen Evangelion watching his second anime, getting a lot of Evangelion vibes from this.
I think this is one of those times where it is actually fitting, though. If you're gonna say that for any show, I think it is this. So.
And what were your thoughts on episode 9 then for you, Shaw?
I think I kind of knew they were building up towards something, because you could kind of tell. I think in the episodes leading up, I think they had revealed that Akane was kind of, behind the kaiju monsters, and it was coming from, they were coming from her, but I don't think we really knew where they were coming from in terms of what her motives were. And then you saw this episode, and you're like, okay, this really changes the game. I think, when you watch shows on a weekly basis, during the airings grind, you're kind of just along for the ride, especially for original series, series that don't have a source material. I mean, so you never really know what to expect, but it's really rare that you get such an incredible episode, and then when that happens, it really feels special. And I think it really nailed just everything from the presentation, the emotional exploration. It elevated Akane to a really fantastic character that she had been building towards since the beginning of the series. And it really just made, I think it made the series. I think it made it a special one that I think it's part of the reason we're talking about it 2-3 years later. Cannot do the math. I forgot what year it was. So I think.
I mean, we're in the times. It was in the before times. Nobody knows how long
ago
the
before times were. Yeah, it was during the
were.
times. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing that really blew me away was, and I mentioned this before, was the fact that Akane, who was before the villain, the antagonist, constantly getting in the way of Gridman and Yuta and Rika and all of them, right? The Gridman Alliance. It turns out she's the loneliest one of them all. And there's a lot of times where antagonists and villains try to be humanized, and I feel like sometimes it's very rare to do antagonists right. If only we had an episode on this podcast with some members of this group where we talked about antagonists.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that the antagonist. You could argue that the antagonist of Gridman carries the series, just like you could argue AJ carries our podcast with the antagonist episode. So it's kind of come full circle.
I didn't even realize it.
It was you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, like I feel like with a lot of antagonists, you either like it's so hard to get a good antagonist. Like you either get someone who changes over to the good side too quickly, and you're like, well, that was unearned. Like that Pro ZD sketch where it's like, oh yeah, like I killed your entire village and all your people, but like I'm a good guy now, so just let me in.
Yeah.
Or they like never develop them enough fully, to the point where you're like, okay, like this person's evil, and sure, some people just want to watch the world burn, but I've already seen Heath Ledger's Joker. Can you do anything more there? But I think Akane does a really good job of like straddling the line between both, where she becomes incredibly sympathetic and you see where she's coming from, but also she's like a crazy murderer willing to like kill people for, I don't know, like knocking a hot dog out of her hand or like getting ketchup on her jacket.
I mean, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
That's true.
I was thinking about that. I'm like, I've had some nice jackets that have been ruined. I don't know. She did nothing wrong.
I will say a small thing I really appreciated about episode 9 was how explicit they were about the LGBT relationship between Rika and Akane, which definitely builds towards the final quarter as well. And I know like this obviously had to be in production way before Darling in the Franxx, but after Darling in the Franxx had its horrific gay erasure homophobia moment, it was really nice to see Trigger like strike back with Rika and Akane. So
The gays won in the end.
the gays won. Yes, they did. So let's talk about that final quarter, episodes 10 through 12, and the ending, especially the final episode of Gridman, which I feel like is really the capstone to it. And AJ, you mentioned this a little before. So what were your thoughts on the ending and what it built towards?
So I think that 9 was the real point where it was the real like I don't know, the most significant point in the anime for me. So I guess 12 was more of it following through and being a confirmation with I guess the last scene being a bit of an exception. But no, in general I thought it was good. It carried through all the plot lines of all the characters. I remember enjoying it quite a bit. Maybe my second favorite in the series. But yeah, I thought it was a really nice conclusion for it.
Nice. And how about you, Moz? What were your thoughts on the ending with, I guess, kind of the, not so much the redemption of Akane, but kind of the forgiveness of Akane for what she did, and people accepting her?
Yeah, it's all right. But even more interesting is just the very, very ending, where it's just like, oh, that's what was going on.
Yeah, the fact that she was actually a human being controlling everything.
Yeah, pretty cool. I think we had a very similar mindset going into this, because I know we both did the seasonal podcast at that time, and you had like brought up just how much was going on with the show going into the last episode, and I was also thinking like, how are they going to wrap this up in one episode? And I think we both said that like, you know, this could just so easily fall apart if there are still, you know, if they have a non-ending or if it's a really confusing ending. You know, it's just so easy to mess this up because there's so much going on, and they completely nailed it. They actually managed to tie up the series really nicely. This very complex, very unique series with lots going on. Yeah, they did it in that last episode.
Yeah, a lot of times they're like, oh boy, they're swinging for the fences, and they're like, oh, you really shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But with this, it felt like they like I know there has to be other anime or other properties that have had that idea, you know, like a person in real life who escapes to a different. It's almost like an isekai in that sense, but not in the traditional sense where she develops this completely new world for herself that she's the ruler of, to try and escape from her troubles. But Gridman, instead of destroying, uses his fixer beam to fix her and to try and like, instead of using violence, using like acceptance and that message to try and grow. And like she's stuck in the kaiju and she's dragged out, and her like she's hiding behind the door and scared to come out, like surrounded by those trash bags and all. And eventually, through the encouragement of Rika and Yuta, and I don't remember his name, the green
best friend guy,
glasses guy.
Best friend.
Yeah, best friend guy.
Yeah.
Let's call him Tomoda. He can be Tomoda.
Tomada, yeah.
She eventually does step out and decides, okay, I have to take that next step. And Rika's like, look, I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And it's because of that reason, I never want to see you again.
No.
Because if she sees her again, that means Akane did not move on. Akane did not grow. Akane just fell back to her old habits. If Rika never sees Akane again, that means Akane is no longer running away from the real world and is doing her own thing and doing it well enough to not have to resort to creating an entire fantasy world where she kills people for sport.
It's also really interesting to think about sorry to interrupt, the implications of what it means when she's killing people in her fake world, her escapism world, where, she sees them as real people, but it's like whenever they kind of inconvenience her, she like, quote, kills them. Like, that's knowing that she's like a real person at the end, and she's finally, learning the great, like, escapism is bad, you gotta face reality. Like, how much of a metaphor that could be for her pushing people away in real life, her kind of eliminating the real people in her real life who might have been trying to get close to her and just escaping further and further because of her inability to cope with reality, and making the connections between the two of like her escapism world and her real world, now knowing that like she's accepting the real world is a really cool way to recontextualize everything that happened thus far.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because there's so much you could dive into, and there have been a lot of people who have done a lot of video essays on it. There's that one that's like, I want to say like an hour long.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite videos.
I've meant to watch it.
It's definitely worth it because it's cool, because he kind of takes an interesting approach where he's not like 10 out of 10 biggest Gridman fan of all time. He's kind of like, okay, this is how a show that I wasn't really enjoying became a show I really enjoyed, and kind of details his experience from episode to episode. And he has some really cool insight. So, I mean, if you haven't already, check out the man mode video on Gridman.
The point of SSSS.Gridman is what it's called.
Yeah.
And while you're there, while you're on YouTube, yes, it is 59 minutes and 59 seconds long.
Great job.
While you're there, you should also watch Boys Invent Great Hero, which is the short that I was talking about, that was done by Akira Amemiya before he did Gridman, for the Japan Animator Expo. That's like a sequel to Gridman.
Huh.
It's like 5 minutes long. There's like no dialogue in it, and it's just like some really cool animation. So all that together, what were your final thoughts after finishing Gridman? Like, did you want more? Were you okay with where it ended? Like, where did it rank to you in your mind? And, sometimes there are anime that, like, stay with you and, like, you think about more often. For me, like, the go-to example is Penguin Drum. I feel like I thought about Penguin Drum, like, every day for 2 years straight or so.
Nice.
But how about you guys? How was SSSS.Gridman for you guys?
Gridman for me, I was very, very impressed with the whole thing. I gave it like a decent 9. And I said that it's my favorite Trigger anime to that point, because I just really loved, and it also cemented Trigger as my favorite studio, because I love the way they make their shows, the way they the way they're able to set up these worlds, set up these characters, the way they're able to design everything just looks so nice and appealing. Yeah, I just really, really liked Gridman. I was pretty much impressed by everything they did with it.
Mm-hmm. How about you, AJ? I know you weren't the biggest fan of it, so what were your takeaways?
Well, yeah, it's sort of similar to what I said in the beginning, but it's just like, while it wasn't a story that I emotionally connected with a ton, it's definitely like a work of art that was conceptually brilliant. I really loved all the things it did in terms of concept. It's beautifully presented. The direction's amazing. Akane, just as an idea, that sort of idea for a character is really, really crazy. And then the execution was good enough to match it and surpass the idea itself. And so all that together made it a series that I really admire and respect a lot, even if I don't particularly enjoy it a ton. I totally understand why everyone else does, who holds it in really high regard. And yeah, in terms of sticking with me, I'd say the ending scene in particular stuck with me a bit more than I expected it to, considering how much I wasn't really super attached to the series. And I definitely would have been interested in more. Well, okay, we know what happened in terms of sequels, right. But I would have been interested in a continuation of that sort of story, that sort of style, but I don't think I would have wanted more from Akane's story. I think where it ended being sort of open-ended and giving the possibility to move on from this sort of escapism, that's pretty much exactly where I would have wanted it to stay, having ended.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty funny. So alongside the anime, they also did a CD, like one of those voice dramas, that would take place either before episodes or after episodes. And the final one, which takes place after the final episode, it has Rika and Glasses Boy walking the street, and they come across who they think is Akane, because she looks exactly like Akane. But she's not Akane. That's not her name. And she's a completely different person. She's like, what's a kaiju? Like, well, Gridman? Megas? Are you guys insane? And it turns out she is just the normal girl that Akane took over when she came into the Gridman universe.
Huh.
Nice.
So it's like one of those confirmations where it's like, okay, this is like really the end of it. Akane is in no way coming back because the person whose body she took over has their body again.
Nice.
So, but yeah. How about you, Shaw? What are your thoughts on it afterwards?
I definitely liked it when I finished it, but I don't think I really appreciated it as much when I finished it directly after. It's one of those series that's really stayed on my mind in the back of my head for a while. So at first I was like, okay, the show is pretty good. And then the more I think about it and the more I think about what it accomplished, I'm like, you know what, that show was actually really good. I'm got to rewatch it. And I think when I rewatch it, I can see giving it either an 8 or a 9. But I think I consider it a really good show. And I think it's, I think it's just a really cool show. As for what did I want more, I think, as you guys have all said, I didn't want any more of Akane's story because I feel like it ended so well that I didn't need more. But hearing the news that we will get to for the second part of this, I thought that would be the perfect way to continue the series without kind of undoing the perfect ending of the first season, as you will.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny. Imagine... because, me and Maz had talked about how we had apprehensions about the ending. Imagine nailing the ending so well that people were like, I fucking loved it. We don't need anything more.
Yeah,
We love that character so much that please do not give us anything more of that. You're golden where you left off. Which I feel like rarely happens for an original property. Never mind adaptations these days. I mean, I feel like some Promised Neverland fans might have something to say
Go back.
About their anime's ending.
Go back.
But I think that image of the real life Akane, waking up in her bed and pushing herself up as the title card comes up is super powerful. I would have loved the poster of that. It's just a really cool moment Because I mean, we've seen other anime use real life images in their anime. I mean, the Monogatari series uses it a ton, but it's in a different way than the way the Monogatari series does. And as everyone who is listening to this podcast knows, there was a sequel-ish franchise announced for Dynazenon. What's really funny to me is that, like, this was more of a riskier project just because, like, Gridman, as mentioned previously, wasn't, like, a hit TV series. Like, there's a lot of history behind it. It was one of the first tokusatsu anime to come over to the West, specifically America, and not just be like a redub, but they like reshot it, like the whole thing with like American actors and a new storyline and all that, just keeping the original title. And I believe back then it was the Japanese show was just called Gridman. And then I believe when it came to the US, it became known as like Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad.
Huh.
And that's how they came up with the name and it was with 4 S's. And that's how it became known as SSSS.Gridman, because it was paying homage to both of those. Both the original Gridman and also saying like, hey, like, remember that English version, American version we came out with, SSSS? Yeah, we're gonna bring up that one too. But Gridman did so well, not just from a DVD Blu-ray standpoint, but especially from a merchandising standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
When I went to Japan in 2019, a full year after Gridman had come out, you could not go into any anime store without seeing like 20 to 30 like pieces of merchandise for Akane and Rika. It was absurd.
Character designs did their job. Let's go.
Exactly.
that merchandise for Akane and Rika, which still comes out, they're still coming out with new Rika and Akane merchandise. I mean, Azure Lane, the gacha game about ships, is having a Gridman Dynazenon collaboration where Rika and Akane are two of the rarest rate up units for people to roll. And it's like absolutely absurd how much staying power they have. And it's really cool when hearing about like the character design process that went into Gridman, where they were like, what kind of assets should we give like Akane? And they were like, well, Akane is like a person who's like has a lot of self-esteem issues, so she wants to have something that like would be considered super cute, super sexy kind of thing. And then they were like, what about Rika? And the director was like, oh, Rika, I love thighs. I fucking love thick thighs. Like, screw narrative purpose. I want a girl with thick thighs. And like that the disparity between the thought that came for those two character designs is really funny to see. And so Dynazenon was greenlit for Studio Trigger in conjunction and collaboration with Tsuburaya again. And so when you guys heard the news for that, and when you first started watching it, what were your thoughts? Shaw, I know you had some thoughts on it, and you weren't too shy about being vocal about them on Twitter.
Oh, this sounds so like baity out of context. Okay, so I was excited.
I'm trying to get a part of those engagements, Shaw. Come on.
I don't know. It's not baity. I don't know if it's baity enough because it's going to be positive.
That's true.
Yeah, so just like with Gridman, so like for some reason, if you go on Mal, my anime list, Public Enemy #1 of me after they changed their layout again, but that's a separate story. It's so bad. I'm so angry. So Gridman has like a really low score for like no reason. And people will be like, they'll tell you a reason and they're like, oh, it's slow at first. I'm like, I've seen some shit that has like a 7.6 and higher for no reason. So like, don't give me that. So like Gridman right now, it is December 5th, 21. It's got like a 7.14. Like, come on. Like.
Oh, Gridman?
Yeah,
or
Gridman.
Dynazenon? Oh, yeah.
So, like, no reason. I don't care what your reason is. It's no reason. And then I heard Dynazenon was coming out. I heard it was, like, not a, like, direct sequel, but it was, like, a similar sequel, kind of like... what
in the same universe franchise. Yeah.
What is it? Spiritual successor. Let's call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, cool. They're going to do something like Gridman, but like kind of different. I'm excited. Maybe like we'll all get on the same page and like realize this is going to be good from the get-go. And then it was still like, it came out and it was in like the 6.0 area, like at the high sixes.
It was great. They were beating its ass in the quote reviews.
Yeah, I'm like, why is it so low? Like, did we not learn our lesson? And the beginning of Dynazenon was good too. Like, it was really impressive. They had a lot. They were kind of doing the jump cuts to kind of establish that unease between the characters. Like, the CGI animation for the cool dino robot was cool. Like, everything was good. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, stop doing this. So I was like, okay, we got to stop underscoring the SSSs. Like, just keep it up. Like, we know it's going to be good by the end. Like, come on. Learn our lesson. Maybe we'll learn our lesson for the third one whenever that comes out, but probably not. So,
I don't have much faith in humanity at this point.
And we'll always get you'll get the contrarian people who will be like, well, like, just, like, don't care about MAL scores. And, like, there's some truth in that. Like, don't care about them too much. But my gripe with that is, every time someone looks to see, like, what should they check out for the season, they'll go to the seasonal tab, they'll look at the highest rated shows, and they'll pick what to watch based off that. So my gripe is that people giving it like a 6, like, it's going to deter people from checking out the show. And like, everyone's entitled to their opinion and they can rate it lower, but like, you watch like an actual 6.0 on MAL, like, very poorly put together, not a good concept, like really just like not good stuff. And then you see Dynazenon and you're like, okay, these two things do not match. Like, the production value is really good. You can tell that there's a lot of intricate writing going behind it. The direction's good. Like, these two things are not the same. So that's where I'm coming from with my whining over MAL scores.
Thank you, Shaw. I'm glad Studio Trigger has such a great defender like you. That's why you got the
getting
Shikishi
triggered
from
over MAL scores, though. They call me up.
Triggered over trigger.
They call me up. It's all good.
Yeah, it was really crazy to see the initial pushback from it. But AJ, what were your thoughts on Dynazenon? Were you with the pushback that was going on Twitter? How were your feelings about it early on?
About the lower scores?
I guess not just the lower scores, but like how did you feel like people were like? What were your thoughts generally on the first couple of episodes of Dynazenon?
I adored them. So I was going into Dynazenon, I was just kind of hoping for more of the same, essentially. Even if I wasn't able to emotionally connect with it, I'd still be able to enjoy it because I knew there was going to be a lot of quality put into the writing and presentation. So I was just fine with more of the same sort of thing, same sort of level of enjoyment for Gridman for me. But immediately, I just kind of connected with it right away, particularly through how they presented a lot of the characterization initially. And yeah, like, so they hooked me in the beginning, even if the first episode is the first half or so of the episode is a kind of sleepy start. It's kind of subdued and understated, and then in the end there's fireworks, but it hooked me through the quieter stuff more so than the bombastic stuff. And so yeah, that hooked me right away, and it just sort of kept continuing with the early episodes and all the way until the end. And I just exponentially enjoyed it more and more the further it went along. So yeah, with reference to the MAL scores, I don't know, I was just confused. I let Shaw go off. And,
I don't think it was like actually a Twitter controversy. It was just me yelling on Twitter. Like, Tay's making it sound like an event, and it was just me being like,
we made it a Twitter
stupid.
Controversy.
We did. It was great.
I was just yelling.
Man, you were yelling at people. I love it when you yell at people. It's so much fun.
It's not even like a real person. I'm just like, stop doing this. Like, stop. The entire MAL community, stop doing this.
Stop being bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely something. And how about you, Moz? What were your initial thoughts about Dynazenon?
Yeah, I also really loved it. Like, kind of like AJ, I really like the quiet bits. It just gave me a lot of the same vibe as Gridman, with how weird and kind of off-putting it was, but also how something I kind of forgot to mention with Gridman is that there are kind of like some lines that you might perceive as throwaway lines, or just something in the background that they wouldn't draw attention to. And so, like, one of the one of the very, very first things said in Dynazenon is just like there are two conversations going on at once, and in one of them says like, "Oh, someone like jumped off a bridge yesterday. Isn't that crazy? Like how can that happen?" or something like that. And I'm like, okay, that's going to be the entire show right there. I was just like laser focused on this one thing that. You know, I'm like, I know you're trying to hide that show, but I know that it's going to be really important.
Solid.
It just really Gridman really heightened my expectations of Dynazenon, where it's like, now I kind of understand what I'm getting into. I kind of understand that, like, I really need to be taking everything seriously, and I really want to pay attention to everything.
Yeah, there's like no wasted details to any of it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. The fact that, like, you know, as you said, when you pointed that out to me the first time, I was like, holy shit, I gotta rewatch it. Because, you know, as we find out later, the idea of whether or not Yume's older sister committed suicide becomes a real point. And it's something that, like, is maybe getting touched upon with Chisei when they're like, oh, like, do you hear about someone getting bullied? And it's like, oh, bullying? Like, I can't believe that shit happens. And so, you know, Chisei is unable to go to school for whatever reason, and heavily hinted that it's because of bullying, that she doesn't feel comfortable going to school.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtext, like, all over the place in the conversations, basically every episode.
Yeah, like from the start, you know, when we meet Yomugi, and he's at the dinner with his mom and the guy she's dating. I mean, AJ, you had a lot of good thoughts on that. If you want to share them.
All right, so yeah, it's basically the thing that drew me into the story was that so Yomogi's at this dinner with his mom and what seemed to be her boyfriend, and he's being nice and polite to Yomogi, and he's giving him some money just for you're in high school, kids your age need some pocket change or whatever. And so immediately you're wondering, what's he going to do with it, because he has a curious look on his face. You don't really know what he's thinking. And then pretty quickly it cuts, and you see him like when they're about to leave the restaurant, he's standing by the counter near the entrance, and his mom just says, okay, let's go now. And then he says, okay, and he has this kind of melancholic look on his face, and he turns away, and you see that he left the gift in the donation bottle or box. Yeah, I think it was a box. And then so that just that action alone made me, like, it just made my imagination go wild about, like, it showed me the type of person he is, I think pretty effectively, with just a little detail, and sort of with the stuff that had happened prior to that, where he had given his food to Galma, pretty much painted a picture of who this character was in 8 or 9 minutes, something like that. And who he was is someone very heartfelt, sweet, caring, but at the same time, he's kind of forlorn at this point in his life. He's not really satisfied, and it just made me want to learn a lot more about him. Why is he feeling this way, or why can't he be as satisfied as he could, as it seems he's not? So yeah, that little detail hooked me in the beginning, and it's done with all the other characters as well, and the payoff, I think, is really good, but it sets the tone right at the start.
Yeah, especially with Yume too, when she meets up with her friend, and she's like, did you, like, I heard you left that one guy hanging again, and she's like, yeah, and it's like, why did you do that? Like, and like, so it gives you like a tease of like her character, and like draws you in without being like too, like, it doesn't just give you like a morsel. It gives you like scraps enough for you to want more. It doesn't just like hang you out to dry, and it follows up a lot on those threads that it starts on. And so once we start to get to meet these characters, what do you guys think of the cast for Dynazenon, which is much larger than the cast for Gridman?
I think it's kind of interesting because, I mean, I guess we kind of foreshadowed this when we forgot the best friend's name in Gridman, but I'd say one of the aspects of Gridman that might need a bit of work is, maybe not work, I don't know. I just say it's not a strong suit, is that I think it was very Akane heavy. I think she was like definitely the best character, and I think most people would kind of agree with that. That like most of the focus was on her character, and it resulted in a really great character. But like, there's not too much to say about the rest of the cast. And then in Dynazenon, the cast is like the focus. Like, it's definitely a very cast friendly show. I think even the fundamental aspect of the show is that they each have a different mecha part that comes together and becomes Dynazenon. And it's cool to see that like teamwork and understanding each other and connecting is such a crucial part of the series. So I'd say the cast is very good.
Very Power Rangers like with that.
For sure.
But in a good way, I think.
I agree.
In the way it brings them all together. Not, it's a metaphor. They have to work together in order to and know each other in order to be together, to combine together. Love metaphors.
Love that for us.
I think personally, I think that it is true that Dynazenon might have a stronger cast overall, but I still think that Rika and Akane are stronger than any of the characters in Dynazenon.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think maybe Rika, but definitely Akane is the strongest character between the two for me, but I think definitely the cast overall for Dynazenon. So, like, pretty much
you don't have to listen to me. I'm a virgin Rika lover.
No, I love Rika too. I love her design, but I'm like, can I really argue that I like her as a character more, or do I just think she looks really cute? It's more
I genuinely liked her the most out of Gridman.
That makes
Because she's a completely normal girl who gets caught up in all this. Right? But
I just thought she was very pleasant.
Still falls through. Yeah, she's nice. Yeah, AJ, would you agree with that? Do you think Akane and Rika, or maybe Akane alone, stands up above the Dynazenon cast? The Dynazenon cast being more of the sum of its parts. The sum is greater than the sum of its parts, or whatever. How that saying goes.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think it's probably, if I were to have to rank them, it would be like Akane first, and then, the primary cast of Dynazenon, and then everyone else for Gridman, sort of deal for me. I think the cast is really super well done in Dynazenon, and that's what helps me sort of adhere myself to the story so easily. And I think each character has their own defined roles. They're all very unique. They are kind of subversive in some ways, a few of them. And it's just their interactions are dynamic, engaging, interesting. And I had a good point and I completely forgot it. But the cast is really good. If I remember it, I'll mention it.
Well, we'll be here for a little longer, so no worries. One thing I really liked about their characterization early on is Gamma is like, the typical like trigger, like brash, cocky leader, in the Kamina.
It's so funny. Everyone's like Kamina. Vein. Like you got it. It's like, oh yeah, you see him, you're like, oh, he's the Kamina of the show. Even if he's not that similar to Kamina, you just see it. You're like, there's Kamina. Got him covered. Checklist. We're good.
And I love how over the top he is with the names and all that. And then you have Yume being like something beam.
I love that.
That's so cute.
She's like, I don't fucking know what you guys are up to. I'm just like, whatever. It's a something beam.
I love that.
And like she never changes it. It's something beam all the way until the end.
I love that.
I remembered it, by the way. It's not a great point, but it's an important one.
It's probably a great point.
So, like I mentioned, they're all the cast are all pretty unique and different from one another, but at the same time, they're all kindred spirits in terms of like what I mentioned before of being at this place in their life where they're kind of stagnant for whatever reason. I think pretty much every major character is experiencing that sort of thing. So they're kindred spirits in that way, which allows the whole Dynazenon experience, everything they go through, to be very meaningful for them in different ways. But it's not samey the entire way through the cast because they all have different reasons that they feel this way. So I really like that aspect.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with all of them. and as they grow. And one thing that I think for me that this does a lot better is when you compare someone like, I guess, the weakest member of the cast for Gridman to me is Utsumi, the glasses guy. But
Did you look up
the
his
weakest
name?
character,
Sorry. I knew you
did
looked
have
up
to look
you
up
didn't
his name.
remember his name.
I literally had to look up his name because I couldn't remember it. But then when you look at Dynazenon, the weakest member of the cast, I think, of the main cast is Koyomi. The NEET who doesn't have a job. He's just like lounges around all day and is kind of quiet. But similar to how episode 9 was like a turning point for Gridman, episode 10 in Dynazenon is again one of the most powerful episodes I've seen, and I think it's so good that it makes someone even like Koyomi really shine.
Mm-hmm. That was also the Kaijus episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who fucking nails it, man. Like you should like it's one of those things where like I would love for them to like storyboard and be in charge of more episodes, but also like it's one of those things where it's like so powerful when like it's like the one episode in the series. Like, could you sustain it for an entire season kind of deal?
For me, I'm afraid that he's too powerful. Like what would happen if he was just given more power and he had control over a whole show? I mean, this is like Vegas. like let's not forget that this is basically Trigger's B team that's making Gridman and Dynazenon. This is literally the Inferno Cop team. So
We knew.
Which is so funny.
We knew it. As soon as we saw the
amazing.
New Jersey Inferno Cop episode, we were like, these guys are going to make the next masterpiece. We got it. We knew.
Exactly. We did literally say it. We're like, we like anything this team makes is gonna be great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because the rest of their team were working on like Promare or BNA. And then they were like, all right, leftovers, work on the Gridman Dynazenon franchise. And it worked out. It is interesting how that happens. Kind of like how Violet Evergarden, the TV series, was done a lot by, not like their A team, but was done a lot by their B team and a lot of Academy, like recent call ups.
wait, really?
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that. I assumed it was by their main team.
No. It was their main team was working on. Was it Koei at the time and Free?
Well,
and so they were like,
Koei came out 2 years before that, though.
Yeah, but Violet Evergarden was in production around the same time.
Huh.
Like, they had the first episode of Violet Evergarden premiere a year and a half before it released.
No, it was in 2017.
At AX. Oh, 2017?
Yeah.
Yeah, and by all reports, they were like pretty much finished with it by the time it started airing. Which is absolutely crazy. That's why, like, even to this day, when they have like Maid Dragon come out, like, there are times where they'll have like staff who come out on Maid Dragon who had left the studio like a year ago, but they were like heavily involved in that episode. And not only has there been so much time that they left the studio, but they were like directing another anime in that time.
Wow.
So Kyo Anime doing like a lot of stuff behind the scenes ahead of time meant that it wasn't a lot of their heavy hitters for Violet Evergarden. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember from watching Under the Scope's phenomenal making of Violet Evergarden video essay, which I would highly recommend.
Okay.
If you're into like the production side of anime and all.
I guess I should watch that, because clearly I have no idea how Violet Evergarden was made.
Yeah,
it's pretty
might
cool.
have to check that out.
I wish there were more things for Trigger for that kind of thing, because I feel like the way Trigger does its anime is also really interesting.
Yeah, they are pretty open about. I wouldn't say pretty open, but they do have a lot more communication with the Western audience than most studios. And I remember just going back to Kai Igarashi, when they did a Reddit AMA, someone asked like, "Oh, who in the studio is like?"
Oh yeah, they did say that.
Yeah, they were like, "Yeah, who's?" Someone was like, "Oh, who's in the studio that just like isn't talked about, like Imaishi and Yoshinara and stuff like that?" And like, yeah, this guy Kai Igarashi, this guy's crazy. Like, you should be looking out for whatever he does.
That was before the
Yeah, that was like a year before
episode.
Gridman.
They were like, bro, like, this kid's crazy. Like, as soon as you see, like, an episode hit drugs, bro, like, watch out. It's gonna be
That's
insane.
kind of cool. They knew.
They knew.
Just
I mean, it's one of
overflowing with
those
talent
things,
at
right?
that
Like,
studio.
yeah. It's really cool to see. Man. So after that Dreams episode, which I mean I love, and the inclusion of Auntie,
Yeah.
or Auntie, in the show, I thought was like an amazing way to cap off the many references that they had leading up to it. Like there were so many, not just like Tokusatsu, but especially Gridman references all throughout Dynazenon. For it to culminate in the appearance of older, much hotter Auntie was very cool. I love that.
And that's like the perfect character to kind of bridge the two series together, because he was like, I don't know, he's not like main cast in Gridman, but he was like a very big player, and like he kind of had his character arc in Gridman. So bringing him back as like a fully developed character who has gone through his own personal character arc, bringing him back to Dynazenon to kind of like help lead, like kind of lead the other characters in that direction is such a perfect callback, but also like great way to bring his character forward.
What did you think about the inclusion of Auntie in second, AJ?
Oh, I thought it was cool. I figured there would be some way to more substantially join the two series, and like Shaw said, I think it was cool how he had already been through all of his material essentially. So being a matured, developed, and more or less static character was a really good sort of tool or device to, after he was introduced, sort of be a way for the primary cast to bounce off of and sort of contrast to see how they develop and continue to go in their own journeys. And also he had some nice dynamics with a lot of them. And him and his friend, I don't know the woman with glasses.
Second.
Oh, okay, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so the two of them had some nice dynamics with the cast themselves, and they grew to have a bit of a bond with them. So that was cool to see too.
Yeah, I really liked. There's that one interaction they have where, they're like, "Why do you guys know so much about kaiju? You guys aren't kaiju, are you?" And neither of them say anything.
Yeah, right. Well, about that.
Sweats nervously.
Interesting. Yeah, I and the blink and you miss it cameo of Akane in Auntie's flashback in episode 10. Bro, I was out of my chair like yelling at the screen. I was like, that is the perfect amount of like Akane cameo. Like no lines, you don't even see her face, but you know it's her there.
Perfect.
Yeah. They really nailed bridging the two of them, which I was really nervous about. Because, you know, how many of us haven't been burnt by sequels for anime that started off really strong? Again, I'm sorry, The Promised Neverland anime fans.
It's just so out of pocket. Like, it's so sad. Go back to... I don't need to remind me of that.
Yeah, we can't all be Uma Musume Season 2 Pretty Derby Season 2.
I mean, I'm just not gonna respond to that.
No comment.
Until I have to watch it. Yeah, I got nothing. Maybe
You know,
I will agree one day, maybe.
Maybe. It is crazy, though, how strong Dynazenon was this year. And the ending for Dynazenon, I will say, when I was watching it, I felt like, in almost an unfair way, I had, like, sky-high expectations for Akane. Not for Akane, for Dynazenon. Because I was expecting something like Akane tier once again. And I don't know if you guys had any other expectations for the ending, or how you felt about the way they executed that ending. Shaw, maybe?
I gotta double check, because, like, I mean, this sounds really bad, but, like, I kind of forget the specifics. I think they all kind of, like, went on their own ways. I think that's, like, what happened, but, I mean, you can say it might be my bad memory, so, like, definitely just chalk it up to that, but I do think the ending was a bit less memorable. But, like, as you said, it's kind of hard to compare with Gridman, where it's, like, such a, like, you know, such a shocking ending where it recontextualizes everything. But, like, Dynazenon didn't really have that, nor do I think it really needed to have that. It's just not as, like, you know, a very, I don't want to say punch in the gut, or, like, you know, not a really shocking ending. It's just kind of like, you know, they grew, they came to know each other, and then they kind of went their separate ways, and like they're kind of at peace. If that's not the ending, then please feel free to like rip me apart, but like I think that's what I remember it as. But I still think it was like a good ending. It just wasn't like an all-time favorite ending, you know?
How about you, AJ? What were your thoughts?
So yeah, it was definitely way different. Gridman ended with a huge exclamation point and sort of the culmination of the this huge conceptual work of art. So I think the Gridman's ending is stronger as well. But like while the two, like you guys have alluded to, while the two series are very similar in sort of vibes and tone and direction and approach, the complexion is totally different. Dynazenon is this sort of pretty much a parallel exploration of all these different characters, whereas Gridman really hones in and puts the most emphasis on Akane, and everything sort of sprawls out from there. So the ending essentially of Dynazenon is what I viewed as something of like a falling action, because Episode 10 is the culmination of a lot of big character arcs. Episode 11 is when everyone sort of settles and realizes what they want to do in life. Maybe they don't verbalize that, but they kind of realized it. And then, so by the end of episode 11, everyone kind of knows where they're going. They've been impacted enough to understand where to go, except for the eugenicists. But and then by the end of episode 11, going into episode 12, Shizumu just in this sort of last gasp, fight to win, because he sees reality as this binding prison sort of thing. He acts out and becomes embodied by this kaiju sort of thing, and then just attacks, and they have to fight him. They ultimately end up beating him, and the end of the last episode is essentially them, Yomogi specifically, speaking to him and sharing his own philosophy to contrast his, and him just sort of being forced to accept that. And Gamma disappears, and everyone sort of, there's a bit of a time skip. Everyone remembers what happened, and then they go their own separate ways, and we see what happens. So it's definitely less memorable, I think. It got a far different role, but I thought it was really effective for what it did in terms of contrasting, like I said, Shizumu and Yomogi, and just being a very Dynazenon ending, which in itself I don't think was as good as Gridman's, but to complete the whole picture, it was exactly what it needed, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like it makes sense, especially with the teaser at the end, that there's going to be a third installment. It very much felt like the ending for something that has a sequel in mind, if that makes sense. Like, I think Gridman, and I could be completely wrong, but the way it ended felt like, okay, this is all that we're going to do for it, so let's go out with a bang kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to, like, have an open ending where more things could happen, because Dynazenon literally ends with Auntie and Nidaime second with the Dynazenon mech in the cyber world. And that's how it ends, with Dynazenon originally grayed out because like it had that one final fight, and then it turning red, and then like it raising its head again. And then it's like, okay, like there's going to be a new franchise, SSSS.Gridman x SSSS.Dynazenon, and that'll be the third installment in this franchise.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more open that way. Like, it would be weird for them to put like an exclamation point when that one feels much more like something in the middle of a sentence. But I agree in the way, especially I really liked how they set up Yomogi having the power of instance what is it? Instance domination. Instance domination. Yeah, where he has the ability to dominate kaiju, and they're like, why isn't he being a kaiju? And like you said, they talk about their different philosophies. But I also really found it cute the way they handled Yume and Yomogi's relationship. I feel like that the one episode where there's the fireworks, you alluded to earlier, and like the end credit scene where like it starts doing a horizontal pan with them being like, hey, like check on where Yume is, like it's been a while, like he starts to run, and then like the camera has to catch up to him, and then you see Yume in a yukata. And I was like, that's really cute. And at the very end, where they're like, the scars we got in the final battle haven't healed yet. But Yume's like, it's okay. I hope these scars never heal, and we always remember about the time that we shared.
Yeah,
So
that
cute.
that ending
they're
was
so
beautiful.
cute.
The fireworks thing.
So cute.
Yeah.
They're so cute.
I was really rooting for that ship, and also I was talking to my friend at the time, my old roommate, and we were talking, and I was like, "Hey man, I have some bad news for you. I think Dynazenon might be the straightest trigger show." And he was like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's very head." And then he's watching it, and he's like, "Oh no, there's a lot of like. Can you not tell the gay subtext between the glasses guy, voiced by Kamiya, and
Galma? Yeah.
Galma? Like,
Yeah.
he's like, there's a lot going there. That is incredibly gay." He's like, I don't know what you're talking about." So, when I was watching that, he's like, "Wow, even the straightest trigger show is still some LGBT representation, I guess." Which I thought was pretty cool because, again, I will never forgive Darling and the Franxx for their gay erasure homophobia.
I'll never
You hate to
forgive
see
the
it.
Franxx.
But yeah, it's all the relationships were really cool, and I hope we get to see more of Chisei because I feel like there was a lot to her character that was hinted at, especially with the subtext. And that one episode where like it opens and there's that really cool shot of her in her classroom. And like it shows her and her fellow students and the teacher with like faces that are like scribbled in, and then all of them disappeared, and like you don't get more of that. So I'm hoping Chisei shows up in the follow up installments.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
Especially because they reveal the tattoo she has on her arm as well.
Of her Goldberg.
Of Goldburn,
Goldberg,
the dragon.
Yeah, I think if we're assuming that nothing gets done with her, which I don't know, I think there's a good chance some more stuff could be done with her. But if that weren't to happen, that would probably be my biggest criticism of Dynazenon, is that Chisei is one of my favorite characters in the show, but I also think that she could have been substantiated a bit more. They didn't explore her as much as I thought, but just like you said.
Yeah, because I think she was probably the weakest character for me, but not because I don't like her as a character. I just wanted a bit more. So that would be perfect season 3 material. Yeah.
And like you said, about it being in the middle of a sentence rather than exclamation point, there are lots of little bits that hint at a continuation, but also like half the cast, I'd say, or around there, sort of end on kind of ambiguous cliffhangers almost. Like Galma just disappears. All the eugenicists, they just disappear into this light. We have Yume and Yomogi who have some sort of conclusion, if you want to interpret it that way. But there's a decent amount of characters who could have more to their journey.
Yeah, that would be great to see. What are you guys' on that note? What are your guys' expectations and hopes for the third installment? I don't think we still have a date for that yet. But
know literally nothing about it. We haven't even gotten a visual yet.
Yeah, we literally just have the black background, white text, SSSS, Gridman X, SSSS, Dynazenon, anime project announced or whatever.
And I think without knowing literally anything about it, it's really hard to know what it'll be, because I think that once we get a visual of it, assuming they show characters, I think then we'll have more of an idea. Like, if it's going to be a new cast, then we can kind of expect maybe something else like Dynazenon, where they're just going to explore new themes, but some characters might cross over or something like that. But if they put out a visual and we see the old characters, or either the Gridman or Dynazenon characters, then I think we'll expect more of a continuation of what Dynazenon was doing. Which I don't know if I think I would. I don't know which one I would prefer, because I do think that Dynazenon was a little bit underdeveloped compared to Gridman, which just felt super thorough with everything it did. So I guess I don't want to see the Gridman characters. But I think they could make it work possibly. I don't know. It's really hard to get a grasp of what is going to happen next with this
Hopefully
series.
they just come together, both casts, all the mechs, all the Goldblums, and they defeat depression just as a concept. Just come together, defeat it all.
They're really going full Evangelion
Yeah,
now.
the kaiju known as depression.
How about you, AJ? What are your thoughts on what's coming next?
I'm down with them just defeating depression. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that'll be nice.
I don't really know what to expect aside from kind of hoping for a bit more material for a character like Chise if possible. That would be cool. But aside from that, I don't really know. I just I'm definitely in for the ride. I just hope that they're able to execute whatever they want to execute to the best of their abilities, because this series is great.
Yeah.
No real expectations or hopes aside from those, minor things.
Yeah, I guess I just want like another Kai Igarashi episode.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I'm expecting. Yeah. Like, all right, when's this coming? When are we getting that banger for real?
For real.
For real. How about you, Shaw?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I have no expectations. I think it's cool. I am kind of hoping they bring both of the casts together. I'm not sure who in the cast, but I mean, it's probably going to be one of those things. Like, if they introduce a new cast and then they keep bringing the other two casts in periodically, I'll just start getting, like, really hyped. I'll be like, yo, it's them from Gridman or them from Dynazenon. So whatever they do, I think I'm going to be pretty hyped with. So they did their work.
It's just gonna continue to be like Power
Yeah.
Rangers, where they kept like every edition of Power Rangers, they would have an episode where the previous generation of Power Rangers would show up for one episode.
Yeah.
And it would just be that.
It's like the Jimmy Neutron and Fairly Odd Parents Power Hour.
Oh yeah, the Jimmy Timmy
Yeah,
Power Hour.
if they do that, but with Gridman and Dynazenon, I think I'll be happy. That's what they got to do.
I'm gonna be honest, the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours always threw me off because whenever you had like Timmy Turner in the Jimmy Neutron world, he looked weird.
But yeah, he
Like, weird
was
as fuck.
very
Yeah.
weird. I remember blowing off a family party for that because that was before you could like record stuff or stream it.
Yeah,
I blew off
remember,
like
yeah,
a family
yeah.
party. I was like, God, you guys don't understand. Like, this is never coming around.
It's the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour.
I think I said something like, I will see you guys whenever. I will never see this again. So, like, and I was not wrong. I have not seen it since. And I have seen family since. So, priorities
That's true.
are all that counts. Yeah.
Amazing. But yeah, one final thing I want to say is we mentioned this a little earlier, but the reference I think and the homage I think that I appreciated the most and the one that got me the most was the one in episode 10 of Dynazenon in the part where Yume and her older sister meet. And her older sister's like, "Whoa, when did you get so tall?" Or like, "Why are you so tall?" And I was like, "Oh, the Gurren Lagann, like, what a fantastic way of like paying homage to such an emotional moment from Gurren Lagann, but doing it in its own way in its own context. Like, oh, that just floored me.
Tears every time.
Yeah, because Shaw, I know you love
I
that
love
scene in
that
Gurren
scene.
Lagann.
No, it makes me so sad. No.
It's like it's maybe one of the most iconic lines in Gurren Lagann that isn't like row fight the power or like believe in me who believes in you or believe in you that believes in
Yeah.
yourself. Who the hell do you think I am kind of thing.
Well, it's one of those things.
Just one of those really understated lines.
Yeah, because it's like in the shows like Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill, like they're so over the top all the time that when they do show those moments of subtlety or like groundedness or just like emotional poignancy, like they stand out 10 times more because everything else is so loud. So it's like everything is loud, and then you dial it down a bit and you get something really quiet and you're like, okay, this is really powerful.
So, and I liked it too because the dream episode and like imagining alternate times, or like what would you have done if you could go back in time and change something, isn't something new, and it is something that Gurren Lagann did. And instead of like shying away from that, it's like saying like, look, we know other franchises did it, we've seen it, we love it too, but we're doing our own thing while paying homage to it and like while being inspired by it. So, but yeah. Well, I think that about wraps it up, unless anyone had some, sudden realizations that they wanted to drop about Gridman or thing. I mean, I could go on for like another hour about the production stuff and like the kaiju and the fact, that the Gridman kaiju made by Akane were designed to look like there was a person inside of them.
Ah.
And they had the Itano, animator Itano, whose full name I forget, but the one from the legendary Itano Circus, literally designed one of the kaiju. He designed like the puppet marionette one.
Wow.
That was like floating in the sky. Yeah, they got like actual Itano to design a mecha, not mecha, kaiju.
That's awesome. Love that.
Yeah, they got a lot of like mecha and tokusatsu people to like guest star to create and design their kaiju, which I thought was also again another really cool way of them being like paying respects to that like really rich culture, like I guess culture and fan base.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Makes me feel bad that it was lost on me.
There were some great articles by Yu Cow Kevin on Sakugaburu, and that's where I read a lot of it. Those articles are amazing for both Gridman and Dynazenon. I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in either of the franchises or the franchise as a whole to check them out. I'm illiterate, but I loved reading them.
Nice.
Well, with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. AJ, thank you so much for coming on to this show. As always, it's a real pleasure to have you on here. And for anyone who's listening to you for the first time, how can they find you, and what you got on deck in terms of projects?
Okay. You can find me on YouTube as ALECZANDXR. Sorry about the name. And in terms of stuff upcoming, well, I'm actually trying to branch out from usual sort of analytical content I'm doing right now. So I'm trying a bunch of new things, and in due time, some things that people don't usually expect from me will be coming out. I've already started that a little bit, so that's pretty exciting.
Ooh.
That does sound pretty fun. Man, if only there was a way that people could find out your future projects and what you have scheduled and what things are on deck. Man, if only people could go to your Patreon and subscribe at a certain perk that lets them see your progress for things. Wait, that is possible? I'm hearing from our producers right now that yes, you should definitely go check out AJ's Patreon and become a patron so you can unlock those amazing perks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And Shaw, people know who you are. Moz, how can people find you?
Say that when we have AJ on here who's carried our podcast. But yeah, where can we find AJ, the underknown guest? Like,
you know what? If you want to find me, just say that you like Mushoku Tensei, and then I'll find you.
Yeah. AJ, tell them where to find us. Like, literally, on our own podcast. That would be pretty funny, actually.
I know. And as always, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe when you can. We've got a lot of content coming out these days. We're actually trying to, and we've been meeting for the last couple of months, one episode a week, which has been really fun. We've been covering a ton of topics that hopefully you've been enjoying. A lot of people have been liking our Kino podcast, which was pretty cool. I gotta check that out sometime soon. That came out, I want to say last week, or it might have been 2 weeks by the time you listen to this episode. So
3 weeks.
Definitely check that out. 3 weeks.
Maybe
wow.
4 weeks.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. You know what it is? It's because we're in year 2 of lockdown of 2.5 weeks. It's really throwing me off. So, yeah. So, for everyone who listened to the end, again, thank you so much. Enjoy the holiday season, whatever you're celebrating, or wherever you are. Try and stay warm and stay healthy and stay happy. And until then, I don't know. Keep finding the kaijus.
Yo, that's kind of inspirational.
See you guys.
That's good. That's good. Sorry, I ruined your ending, but that was good. Keep fighting the kaijus. Fight your own personal kaijus. That's kind of cute. Sorry, I definitely botched that. I botched it. You can cut that out, but that was good.